Poetic justice is one of narrative's favorite gears. In the end, the hero triumphs, the villain pays for his sins, and everything aligns as it should. But what happens when it doesn't? What happens when the scales tip, however subtly, toward the dark side of the story? Over the decades, some films have dared to break this silent pact with the audience, the one in which good prevails, evil bows down, and the credits roll with a comforting sense of relief. In these works, the ending is something else. Bitter, unsettling, sometimes even brutal in its coldness. What all these stories have in common is the feeling that even when evil doesn't laugh last, it still comes out ahead. And it's no coincidence that many of these plots have become classics precisely for subverting our most instinctive expectations. But in the end, what happens when evil not only wins, but does so in full view, without disguise, without remorse, and, most disturbingly, without any apparent consequences? Hello, restless minds. I'm Code, and this is Discover It, where curiosity has no limits. Subscribe and help the channel grow, because every time you like, comment, or share, you're helping us bring these discoveries to more people. Together, we can build a community where curiosity can change the world. And now, without further ado, let's get into the video. Amid the dry heat and decaying aesthetic of 1930s Los Angeles, Chinatown builds its plot on a foundation of institutionalized corruption, convenient silences, and a tension that grows like a crack in a reservoir. The film follows private detective Jake Sheet, hired to investigate a possible adultery case. What seemed like just another routine job soon turns into a complex web of manipulation, blackmail, and family secrets that cross every ethical boundary. The plot, seemingly centered on infidelity, unfolds to reveal a scandal involving land, water control, and a family legacy marked by abuse. The story's villain, Noah Cross, is not a caricatured Machiavellian archetype. He's subtle, smiling, wealthy, and powerful, the kind of man who moves through elite circles without ever raising suspicion. But behind the respectable facade lies a depraved figure who, with frightening ease, committed incest and used his influence to cover it all up. He doesn't operate in shadows with daggers or masks. On the contrary, his weapon is impunity. The city is in the hands of men like him, and any attempt to challenge that seems futile. Jeet, as experienced and cynical as he is, constantly finds himself one step behind. The final twist comes when Evelyn, Cross's daughter and victim, tries to flee with her sister-daughter, Catherine. The escape plan ends in tragedy. In a quick, dry scene, Evelyn is shot dead by the police during the escape. Catherine is taken by Cross, who leaves the scene with the coldness of someone who knows nothing will ever touch him. The detective, powerless, is silenced by a simple piece of advice: "Forget it, Jake. It's Chinatown." That final line doesn't refer to a physical location, but to a twisted logic, a world where morality has no place, where evil doesn't need to hide. The power of Chinatown lies precisely in offering no relief. There's no symbolic punishment, no partial redemption, no promise of future justice. The villain gets exactly what he wanted, and the protagonist can do nothing. The audience, used to heroes solving mysteries and saving the innocent, is left with a deeply unsettling feeling. No matter how hard you fight, there are structures of power that are unbreakable. Instead of answers, we're left with the awkward silence of defeat. The film doesn't use evil as a shocking or cathartic element. It presents it with such naturalness that the most disturbing part is realizing how much it resembles the real world. Could that be the true genius of the narrative? Showing that sometimes the monsters wear expensive suits, drink fine wine, and don't need to run. They simply wait, because they've already won before the story even begins. On the road between cities, in the seemingly ordinary setting of a European gas station, a woman vanishes without a trace. There are no screams, no chase, no visible violence. Just the disappearance, quick, dry, silent. That's how the vanishing begins, with a simple yet terrifyingly effective premise. From that point on, The film abandons the pace of conventional thrillers and dives into a dense, anguishing narrative, where obsession is not treated as an emotional trope, but as a corrosive cycle that sets in slowly. Rex, the missing woman's boyfriend, becomes consumed by the mystery. Time moves on, years pass, but the lack of answers prevents him from letting go. At the same time, the viewer is introduced to Raymond, a methodical, mild-mannered family man, and the one responsible for the disappearance. The film doesn't hide the identity of the criminal. On the contrary, it makes a point of showing that he lives normally, calmly, and precisely planning his actions, testing his own moral limits before abducting someone. There is no anger, no clear motive, only curiosity. Evil in this case is cold, rational, almost scientific. The duality between the two characters is what sustains the film's tension. On one side, Rex, consumed by a near-pathological need to know the truth. On the other, Raymond, calm and observant, willing to reveal everything, but under one condition. Rex must agree to experience exactly what his girlfriend did. The proposal is unsettling. It's not just about knowing what happened, but living through the horror to the end. How can one refuse, after years of searching? The film puts the protagonist face to face with the most irrational and human choice possible, to risk his own life, to quench the anguish of uncertainty. Rex accepts. He drinks the coffee offered by Raymond, laced with sedatives. The next scene shows the protagonist waking up in a wooden coffin, buried alive. There are no screams, no rescue, no cutaway. Reality is raw. The ending is silent and final. The mystery at last is solved, but at the cost of his own life. Meanwhile, Raymond returns home, where his wife and daughters await him. His routine continues untouched. The contrast between the banality of his life and the monstrosity of his actions is what makes the ending even more disturbing. There's no need to show violence to suggest it. The film understands that the greatest horror lies in normalcy. Raymond is not a classic cinematic killer. He's the neighbor who smiles in the elevator. The lesson the vanishing seems to leave hanging in the air is simple and devastating. Evil can hide in plain sight. And when it chooses to act, it doesn't need to run. It already knows that in the end, no one will stop it. The city where Say 7 and takes place is never named, but its identity is etched into the dark, suffocating atmosphere that fills every scene. It rains almost constantly. The streets are dense, shadowy, and the windows seem to never let in natural light. It's in this claustrophobic setting that two detectives, the veteran Somerset and the impulsive Mills, are faced with a string of brutal murders. Each crime corresponds to one of the 7 deadly sins. But unlike typical serial killers, the perpetrator here has a plan. A project with a calculated beginning, middle, and end. As if he isn't just killing, but building a work of art. His name is John Doe. No known past, no revealed motive at first. Only the coldness with which he carries out his crimes and the symbolic precision with which he organizes them. The victims are not chosen at random, but for representing what he believes to be the worst in humanity. Each death is a manifesto. There's no chaos in his logic, only judgment. And throughout the film, even without being seen, his presence is constant. Each new body is a reminder that Doe isn't just killing, he's trying to teach something. But what? The tension peaks when Doe turns himself involuntarily to the authorities. He proposes a deal. He will take the detectives to the location where the final 2 sins will be revealed on the condition that only Somerset and Mills accompany him. The path to the climax is slow and agonizing. In an open field under a gray sky, a van approaches. It delivers a box. Inside, what is suggested to be the head of Mills's wife. One sin fulfilled. Envy. The victim was chosen for being loved, for representing a life Doe could never have. Mills, consumed by grief, loses control and shoots Doe, fulfilling the final sin, wrath. In the end, Doe is dead, but according to his logic, that was part of the plan. He didn't want to survive. His work required sacrifice. And so, even falling with a bullet to the head, he triumphs. Mills, now emotionally destroyed, becomes the final link in his narrative. Somerset, who spent the entire film trying to hold on to some hope in the world, is faced with a reality where justice fails and evil is meticulously planned. What's left when everything unfolds according to the killer's plan? Say 7 and doesn't end with an arrest, an acquittal, or a hopeful twist. It ends with silence, the sound of distant sirens, the resignation of someone who has seen evil act with method. John Doe does not survive, but he wins, and he leaves behind not only bodies, but a lingering echo. Is it possible to stop someone who believes they are right, even when committing atrocities? The starting point of the Final Destination franchise isn't a masked killer, an ancient demon, or an uncontrollable military force. It's death itself, not as a concept, but as an entity, an invisible, silent, patient presence. In the first film of the series, a group of teenagers escapes a plane explosion thanks to one of them having a premonition. What seems like a miracle soon reveals itself as merely a delay. One by one, the survivors begin to die in bizarre, violent, and almost comical ways, like dominoes pushed by a hand that never shows itself. Unlike so many horror stories, there's nowhere to hide here. There's no creature to kill, no antagonist with a face. Death acts in the details. A drop of water, an exposed wire, an improbable chain of events that culminates in the inevitable. And the most disturbing part is that the viewer knows this. Each scene becomes a game of tension. The camera lingers on seemingly harmless objects, as if everything around could kill. And it can. No matter how much the characters run or try to anticipate, death always has a plan B. As the films go on, the structure repeats with creative variations. In each new story, someone foresees a catastrophe, an explosion, a collapse, a crash. By avoiding the initial accident, the characters unknowingly enter an invisible queue, as if they had disrupted the natural order of things. Death then begins to correct the mistake. But is there really a mistake? Or is the real question that they never truly escaped, only were deceived by a fleeting moment of false hope? What stands out most in the franchise is the ironic tone with which death acts. These are not quick or quiet eliminations. The deaths are exaggerated, elaborate, like traps in a macabre game. This theatricality creates an unsettling contrast. If death is a natural force, why does it seem to act with such sadism? The answer, of course, is never given. But the suggestion is clear. There is something behind the events, something that enjoys watching humans try to defy the inevitable. At the end of each film, even when the characters believe they've broken the cycle, death returns. Always with one last blow, one final piece of the puzzle. The viewer learns quickly, there is no escape. The saga's silent moral is direct and cruel. If death has marked you, sooner or later it will come. And when it does, it won't just come to take you, but to remind you that challenging fate comes at a price. And that price comes with interest. Inside a filthy bathroom, two people wake up chained by their legs, trapped on opposite sides of the room. In the center, an apparently lifeless body, a tape recorder, some instructions. That's the claustrophobic setting in which Saw begins its proposition, a series of moral traps, where the victims must decide how far they are willing to go to survive. The man behind it all is known as Jigsaw, but unlike traditional villains, he doesn't consider himself a killer. He defines himself as someone who tests the value of life. Jigsaw's logic is perversely rational. He selects people who, in his twisted view, do not value their lives. Addicts, suicides, traitors. Instead of killing them directly, he puts them in extreme situations. Want to survive? Then tear your own flesh, cut off a limb, sacrifice another person. In his mind, if the victim dies, it's because they didn't value their existence enough. But is it really a test or just torture disguised as philosophy? What makes the character even more disturbing is his coldness and preparation. He watches everything from afar, plans ahead, anticipates reactions. And he doesn't act alone. Throughout the films, Jigsaw gains followers, people who buy into his logic and continue his methods even after his death. The idea perpetuates, and his presence continues to haunt even when he's no longer alive. His legacy is one of suffering, but also of ideology. This transforms him into something more than a villain. He becomes a symbol of moral terror. In the first two films of the franchise, the focus is on showing the reach of this mentality. Each trap is designed with surgical precision. The settings are dirty, closed, inhospitable, like extensions of Jigsaw's own disease body. And even if the characters manage to escape the traps, the psychological and physical damage is irreversible. Victory, if it exists, is never complete. In many cases, surviving is simply trading one prison for another. By the end of these early chapters, it's clear that Jigsaw achieves his goals. People change, they repent, they break, but the change doesn't come from learning, it comes from trauma. And if the villain's intention was to force transformation, he succeeded. The question that remains is, at what cost? And more importantly, if evil finds ways to justify its actions, at what point do we stop recognizing it as evil? Terminator 3. Rise of the Machines revisits the already familiar universe of the previous films, where the battle between humans and machines defines the fate of civilization. The difference here lies in the tone, less heroic, more resigned. The film follows John Connor, now an adult living on the margins of society, trying to avoid the role that was prophesied for him. The leader of the resistance against the rise of artificial intelligence. The hope planted at the end of T2, where Judgment Day was supposedly averted, fades away in the early layers of the plot. Connor ends up confronting the threat he thought he had left behind, this time in the form of the TX, an advanced Terminator model with vastly superior adaptability and destructive capabilities. She is not just there to eliminate him, but to ensure the execution of a much broader plan. To make sure that the rise of Skynet happens as intended, this completely shifts the film's perspective. Events are no longer being prevented, they are being fulfilled. Throughout the story, John and his future wife, Kate Brewster, are led to believe there is still a chance to stop the apocalypse. But when they finally arrive at the destination revealed by the reprogrammed Terminator sent to protect them, the truth comes out. The location is not a command center to shut down Skynet, but a fallout shelter. The plan was never to stop Judgment Day. It was to survive it. Skynet was already operational, spread across the global network, and the nuclear attack was inevitable. The future they fought to prevent not only arrived, it was completely out of their control. The impact of this ending is brutal. There is no final battle, no victorious explosion. There is silence, distant detonations, and the realization that the end has begun. John and Kate are left isolated in a bunker, listening to radio signals from other survivors. The war they tried to prevent will now be the battlefield that defines their lives. Skynet, on the other hand, wins effortlessly. It wins with a click, with a code, with a coldness that no physical force could stop. What Terminator 3 subtly but firmly suggests is that certain paths for humanity are not carved by cartoonish villains, but by accumulated decisions over time. The rise of the machines is not an anomaly, it is a consequence. And in the end, when the lights go out and the sky bursts into flame, only one question remains in the air. What if the real enemy was never the machines, but the human impulse to create them without measuring the consequences? Across the vast plains of Texas, between dusty roads and small towns forgotten by time, a hunter stumbles upon a crime scene involving drugs, weapons, and a trail of bodies. He finds a briefcase containing $2 million and decides to take it. From there, No Country for Old Men unfolds as a quiet spiral of consequences. Llewellyn Moss's choice, simple at first glance, sets in motion a chain of events that defies any logic of redemption or conventional punishment. In pursuit is Anton Chigurh, a figure who defies common classification. His behavior is methodical, his appearance cold, his morality unfathomable. He decides people's fates with a simple coin toss, as if obeying only the laws of chance. But there's a disturbing detail. Once the coin spins, his decision is final. He never hesitates. There's no emotion, no visible pleasure, just the execution of a logic only he understands. Shiger acts like a force of nature, and therein lies his terror. The film doesn't follow the typical structure of a final showdown between good and evil. Moss, the protagonist, dies off-screen, without glory, without redemption. Sheriff Bell, who should be the guardian of order, watches everything unfold with a weary gaze. He can't make sense of the new world taking shape before him, a world where evil isn't just violent, but indifferent. A sense of helplessness pervades the entire narrative. There is no stopping the inevitable. Shiger isn't a villain to be defeated. He is the embodiment of a time that no longer belongs to old men. Even when he's injured in an accident, Shiger isn't captured or punished. He simply disappears, as if he had completed another phase of a journey that doesn't end there. The film offers no moral lesson, no emotional catharsis. It merely portrays the unfolding of a harsh reality where evil may not be defeated, not because it's invincible, but because it operates on a plane where no direct confrontation is possible. No Country for Old Men doesn't aim to shock. It aims to observe. And in the end, when the sheriff retires and shares his confused dreams with his wife, the only certainty that remains is that something is moving in the world, something that escapes control, justice, and understanding. Evil here doesn't shout, it walks, and no one seems willing or prepared to stop it. In the routine of a bank, amid bureaucratic decisions and performance targets, a young loan officer denies an extension to an elderly woman. The act seems like a cold formality, but in Drag Me to Hell, it becomes the spark for a curse with supernatural roots and irreversible consequences. The old woman, frail-looking and erratic in behavior, places a curse on the employee, not out of revenge, but to punish what she perceives as disrespect. From that moment on, the protagonist's life becomes surrounded by disturbing, inexplicable, and increasingly violent manifestations. The curse revolves around a seemingly mundane object, a button from the old woman's coat. It carries the mark of punishment, and it must be passed on in order to shift the curse to someone else. For 3 days, the young woman is haunted by a demonic entity that manifests in various ways: noises, visions, physical attacks, and hallucinations. The terror grows not only due to the direct threat, but because of the isolation the protagonist begins to experience. Who can help her, after all, against something that cannot be seen or explained? Desperate to escape her fate, she seeks help from mediums, rituals, and even sacrifices, all in an attempt to bend the rules of the supernatural game that has taken over her life. At one point, she believes she has solved the problem. She buries the button with the body of the woman who cursed her, convinced she has freed herself from the doom. But the logic of the curse is more meticulous than she imagined. Her confidence turns into unpreparedness. The sense of relief is short-lived. In the end, everything is revealed. She had buried the wrong object. Upon reuniting with her boyfriend at the train station, the truth comes to light. Before any action can be taken, demonic hands burst from the ground and drag her to the depths. There is no time for screams, no room for resistance. The curse fulfills its promise, faithful to what it foretold from the beginning. The justice that governs the film's universe is not that of the courts, but of ancient, merciless forces indifferent to human remorse. Drag Me to Hell portrays evil not as something grandiose, but as something that can emerge from a simple, thoughtless, routine decision. The punishment is not only cruel, it is meticulously just according to its own rules. The film doesn't seek redemption, it seeks coherence. And in this world of invisible laws, those who transgress must pay, even if they don't understand why until the very last second. In a secluded house surrounded by a silent forest, the death of a matriarch sets off a chain of events that destabilizes an entire family. In Hereditary, the story begins with grief, but soon reveals itself to be about something much deeper, a dark legacy built over generations. The protagonist, an artist who creates miniatures, lives with her husband and 2 children. At first, the tensions seem merely familial, emotional. But little by little, the atmosphere becomes oppressive, as if something invisible is seeping into the walls, the thoughts, the gestures of everyday life. The grandmother's presence, even after death, continues to be felt. Old photographs, notes, enigmatic symbols, and nightly disturbances suggest she was involved in something much bigger, a cult devoted to the invocation of an ancient demon. The granddaughter, Charlie, displays strange, disconnected behaviors, as if she's in tune with a force beyond comprehension. Her sudden death, in a grotesque accident, marks the first irreversible break in the family sanity. And contrary to what one might expect, this is not the climax. It's merely the beginning of the descent. From that point, the events escalate. The father tries to remain rational, while the mother is consumed by dreams, visions, and disturbing memories. The son, Peter, spirals into a growing state of vulnerability, slowly being prepared, unbeknownst to him, to become host for something about to awaken. The house transforms into a ritualistic space, a silent board where invisible pieces are moved with precision. No action is random. Everything was already written. The family, no matter how hard they fight, is just a cog in a much larger plan. In the end, when chaos erupts, there is no battle. The mother, possessed, takes her own life in a ritualistic manner. The father is consumed by flames, and Peter, in a state of shock, submits, or rather is overtaken. His body becomes the vessel for Paimon, a demonic entity awaited by the cult. The cult members, previously hidden, now appear on screen, reverently celebrating the new host with an almost peaceful demeanor. The horror lies not in the presence of evil, but in the revelation that everything was meticulously planned, long before the story even began. Hereditary doesn't treat evil as a rupture. It presents it as destiny, a burden inherited, cultivated, carefully constructed over the years. The family's destruction isn't the result of poor choices, but of a hidden project executed with precision. When it all ends, there's no judgment, no punishment, only a coronation. And evil, once again, remains, not as an intruder, but as inheritance. In a universe where heroes save the day with shiny suits, witty one-liners, and epic battles, Avengers, Infinity War breaks the mold. The threat here isn't an invasion or a villain thirsty for territorial power. It's Thanos, a stoic, resolute figure driven by a logic that transcends traditional good versus evil. His goal is to eliminate half of all life in the universe with the justification of restoring ecological balance. A radical proposal, but one he pursues with almost philosophical calm. He doesn't seek dominion, he seeks silence. Throughout the film, the Avengers and their allies mobilize on different fronts to stop Thanos from collecting all 6 Infinity Stones, artifacts that, when combined, grant ultimate power. The antagonist's journey unfolds like a personal, almost religious mission. Each stone acquired demands a sacrifice. To obtain the Soul Stone, for instance, he must kill someone he loves. And he does, throwing his adopted daughter Gamora off a cliff without visible hesitation. Evil here is not impulsive. It is methodical, coherent with its own doctrine. Even faced with the combined strength of celebrated heroes, Thanos presses on. In Wakanda, the final battle seems to tip in favor of the Avengers. They even manage to destroy one of the stones, momentarily halting the plan. But Thanos rewinds time using the Time Stone and undoes the sacrifice. Nothing stops his march. With a snap of his fingers, he completes his mission. People begin to vanish, not in explosions or screams, but silently disintegrating into dust. Half the universe's population is wiped out in seconds, including some of the most beloved heroes. The impact of this moment lies not just in the defeat, but in how it happens. There's no victory speech, no backup plan. Evil triumphs with a simple gesture. The final scene shows Thanos alone in a peaceful place, looking out at the horizon. His goal was achieved. He is not on the run, not in hiding. He is at peace. The grandeur of his act is overshadowed only by the normalcy with which he accepts it. The universe is now different, and he believes he did the right thing. Infinity War ends with no immediate hope, no promise of redemption. The feeling is one of emptiness. The heroes didn't fail out of incompetence, but because they were up against someone who truly believed that what he was doing was necessary. And in that conviction, even amidst suffering and chaos, evil wins, because it doesn't see itself as evil, only as inevitable. In all these stories, evil doesn't need to be loud, monstrous, or theatrical. It can be silent, patient, wrapped in logic, or even justified by a greater cause, whether through a supernatural curse, a cosmic force, or a simple human being with time and conviction. What these films show is that when evil wins, it rarely arrives with fanfare. It comes with silence, with acceptance, with the realization that there isn't always a hero ready to stop it. What's most disturbing, however, isn't evil's victory itself, it's how natural it feels. When evil wins coldly, calculatedly, or even bureaucratically, it leaves a deeper mark than any explosion. And maybe that's why these films continue to echo in the minds of those who watch them. Because in the end, there's no redemption, no comfort, only the lingering question left unanswered: if evil can win so easily, how many times has it already won without anyone noticing? If you enjoyed this journey of discovery, don't forget to like, share with your friends, and leave a comment below about what caught your attention the most. Maybe others will relate, and we can start a great conversation. And of course, subscribe to the channel for more content where curiosity knows no limits.